Serious Redditors, who accidentally killed someone? How has it impacted your life? When I was 16, I was going home from work late and I needed to swing by the gas station. I was getting ready to make a left turn into the station and waited for a few motorcycles to pass. And I looked down the road to clear the turn and saw a signal from the motorcycle about a mile away. So I went ahead and made the turn. About halfway through the turn, I saw a light getting brighter and noticed the guy was maybe 3 feet away from the car. That's when time began to slow down. As I stomped on the gas to try to get out of the way, it was unfortunately too late, as his body hit the side of my car, completely shoving to the side. I got out, and he just lay crushed in the street. The gas station was very busy, so a crowd immediately formed around the man, and the cops and ambulance came. He died a few hours later in the hospital. After the accident, I just sat on the side of the road thinking, well, I'm going to prison. I just killed a dude. Very much in shock. And a bystander came up to me and said, "Did you see what you did? Go see what you did." I wasn't really responsive at the time. After detectives came and talked to people and found out the guy was going well over 150 miles on a bike, trying to catch up to his friends when I pulled out, he didn't slow down, but apparently ditched his bike and only his body hit the car. Turns out, if he stayed on his bike, he would have missed me completely. I was bothered for some time, but had to come to accept that this kind of crazy shit happens. Just have to carry on. Throw away because I don't want to get this linked to my main account. I was actually going to tell this story to another thread a couple of weeks ago, but deleted it. I used to be an airline pilot for a relatively large regional airline. Because I didn't make much money doing it, I worked as a flight instructor on my days off from the airline. One day, a student of mine and I were practicing some maneuvers over an area with a lot of trees. As we were finishing up and about to go back into the airport, our engine started acting weird. It was a bit rough and we lost RMP. No big deal, I thought. I figured we were just running the mixture too lean, so I enriched it and had no improvement. I started heading towards the field. We passed a couple miles back. It wasn't big. It was our best shot if things were going to get worse, as the airport was something like 15 miles away. The engine only got worse. I was having trouble maintaining altitude and radioed in a mayday call with our position. Eventually, the engine died completely. I tried to restart, but nothing worked. As we were lining up our final approach, we made sure the airplane was secure and all that. Turns out, the fields was a lot smaller than I thought. We touched down, and it was extremely rough. I had a lot of pressure on the brakes trying to unlock them. The trees were coming up so fast, and I decided we weren't going to stop, so I tried to get the airline back on its front wheels and slam on the brake to make it flip so we could at least stop. I thought about it too late, and we smashed straight into a big tree. I can't remember clearly getting out, but I do remember seeing my student in the front seat, slouched over, with his head to the side. I tried to yell for him to get out and realized his eyes were open. The police arrived within minutes of us touching down, and later they said they saw us coming in. They got my student out, took me to the hospital, and looked at an x ray because I had a bad pain in my neck and back. They pronounced my student dead at the scene. His neck snapped on impact. I didn't have any legal action taken against me or anything. The NTSB and the FAA said that I did the right thing in the situation. I just wish I could have got that plane flipped over. I feel guilty. His wife blamed me and tried suing me. I have extreme anxiety and don't fly anymore. I wish I could bring myself to do it because I truly loved it. I work construction now because I've always loved building stuff and fixing up the house. I'm 36 years old and have it on my bucket list to fly one last time. A very drunk guy tripped off the sidewalk into 5 o'clock traffic, right in front of me. Not enough time to stop. He was limp enough that when I hit him with my SUV, he wrapped up on my back right tire. I stopped the SUV, got out, and found him wrapped up like a burrito. So many broken bones, blood everywhere, but his head was resting at the 10 o'clock on the tire. Was in the process of reaching to touch him just a few inches away, and I saw him breathe. I started crying, went up to the sidewalk, and went into shock. After firefighters, cops, ambulance came by, took the report, and I was taken back to my apartment from a friend. Spent that weekend at their place, and they drove the SUV to my apartment beforehand. But it took over a week for me to be able to drive the SUV again. 2 weeks later, was told the vehicle was a crime scene, so cops took it for another day, but deemed it not needed. Found out the parents were trying to sue me. But due to 5 witnesses at the location, which I didn't even know, they vouched for me. The toxicology reading was at 0.25 alcohol level at death, and he had hepatitis C. One of the firefighters caught that when they were removing him due to all the blood, and the parents didn't even know about it, most likely due to drugs. So they dropped the case. I will never drive on the sidewalk side of the road unless it's a one way. And I still hug towards the interior and tend to swerve if people are on the sidewalk. It occurred 12 years ago. It wasn't my fault, but when I used to drive a wheelchair transport van, the bracket that holds the wheelchairs down failed. The guy tipped over enough to hit his head on the cross brace when I turned a corner. He had a degenerative disease and had fragile bones. He ended up in the hospital and never recovered, passed away a few days later. The last I heard, the company that made the brackets ended up changing their design because the accident unveiled a flaw in their design. I think about it a lot because the person who died was in my care. I don't feel guilty about it or anything. There is nothing I could have done differently. Something just broke. It's still a bummer when I think about it, though. About 5 years ago, I hit an old lady in the street while I was on my motorcycle. I believe she was dead on the scene, but wasn't pronounced dead until the hospital. I wasn't drinking or speeding. She just ran across the street chasing the bus. I always remember the instant she turned to look right before I hit her. It definitely shook me up, and I'm rather sensitive to crossing the street, especially jaywalking or outside of the crosswalk. Every once in a while, I get flashbacks and kind of shudder, just remembering everything, replaying it over and over. I still live near where it happened and have to drive that street occasionally. I am always cautious now in areas with a lot of pedestrians, watching carefully to make sure no one is crossing. I think it didn't help that the spot I hit her, I have had cars or people trying to cross before cutting me off. I remember the day it happened. I was driving slower than I might usually because I knew it was a trouble spot. There's still that what if I haven't driven it or what if I saw her before she started crossing. I'll always have that with me, knowing she died and her kids and grandkids never saw her again, knowing she was just trying to get to work to provide for her family, only to get killed by someone on his way to work. It sucks. I've never spoken to her family, though her son was at the scene that day, and I couldn't imagine what they went through. But I hope they know it wasn't intentional or negligent on my part, and I hope they are doing okay. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to meet them. I don't know what I would say or do. Not killed immediately, but turned into a quadriplegic, which is a death sentence for a 19-year-old. I was also 19 years old, driving a friend of mine around my hometown because he hadn't been there in years. He had moved out of state many years before. Was a narrow country road, very hilly and windy. I am cresting the top of one hill, going a little faster than the speed limit, and a van comes driving right down the center of the road. There's a steep embankment to the left and a deep ditch to my right. I swerved to miss the van, realized I was going into a ditch, and swerved back. I ended up swerving completely around the van and hit another embankment to the left. My car flipped that hill 7 times. I was wearing a seatbelt, but he wasn't. My side of the car was practically crushed. His barely had a dent. But because I was wearing a seatbelt, I just got glass embedded in my face and scalp and messed up my left eye, shoulder, and hip. Because he was not wearing a seatbelt, he broke his neck. He blamed me for the accident and for everything that happened to him. So I've not heard from him since it happened. I can only assume he's dead now, as the life expectancy of a full quadriplegic is pretty low. It's been 15 years, but no one gets in a vehicle that I am in without a seatbelt. Period. I am a surgical resident in the United States, and lost a patient that I knew was my fault. I can't go into much detail due to patient privacy, but I could say it was a young woman with a husband and young kids who was in for a routine weight loss surgery. She had complications for the day of surgery, but I was on hour 36 of a long weekend call and missed it when I checked on her. She coded and died. We managed to get her into the OR and reoperate, but she languished for weeks in the SICU. We eventually had to withdraw care, and I'll never forget the heartbreak in her husband's eyes. He told me he forgave me, but I never forgave myself. After all, she was having the surgery to keep up with her young kids, and I took that from them. I had a head injury that took me out for a few months earlier in the year, and those two traumas combined sent me into a deep spiral. I started drinking and doing terrible at work. I couldn't sleep and had nightmares. I developed a deep anxiety and depression and ended up losing my fiance of 4 years, as well as most recently my job. It has been 2.5 hard years. And my depression just lost me my current girlfriend. I am starting counseling to seek to recover, and I'm hopefully going to be able to salvage my career. I already feel better. I guess to answer the question, the death has destroyed my life, but I'm determined to pick up the pieces and not let it destroy my future. Without a doubt, one of the hardest things I've ever been through. I was driving to meet my mom for dinner near her work after class. It was maybe 7 p.m. I typically take the highway when heading out that way, but it was a nice day, so I decided to take the back road. Along the way, there was a cyclist going along. I noticed him, but he was in the bike lane, which is decently sized. The road was 45 miles per hour, but I had slowed down some. As I get closer, I made sure to get closer to the center of the line to give him some space. Then, once I'm barely a few yards from the guy, he decided to turn directly in front of my car. He didn't make any indication that he would be turning. He didn't so much as look. And there wasn't an intersection in that area. But nonetheless, here he was, directly in the path of my car, with barely a few feet separating us. I remember very distinctively everything seeming to slow down. I reflexively slammed on my brakes as hard as I physically could. I watched in agony as my car screeched towards him. The last thing I remember is his body coming up on my windshield, the sound of crushing metal and breaking glass, and the blood. Supposedly, I had called the cops hysterically begging for help. When they had arrived, I was on the ground, kneeling next to the man, sobbing. As he laid face down on the sidewalk, not moving, he was pronounced dead at the scene. After the accident, I went numb. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was so nauseous I could barely stand. And in the few moments when I get myself together, I was forced to have the same conversation over and over with police, lawyers, detectives on what happened, always pressing for more details. It was torturous and felt never ending. Months later, after the investigation was concluded, I learned the cyclist, apart from not wearing a helmet, was a homeless drug addict and was likely high on heroin at the time of the accident. But that didn't come out till months later after it happened. It had been published in the local newspapers that a cyclist had been killed in a car accident. It was a big story for the town, and I saw it everywhere online. I know I shouldn't have, but I read the comments people left on the article, all saying things like, the driver was probably texting. It's so unsafe out there for cyclists, and other things, and that it was my fault. I internalized it. Even though I'm absolutely certain I was paying attention, part of me keeps thinking thoughts about how I might have looked down at some point to perhaps adjust the radio and didn't see the signal, that I missed my opportunity to avoid this, that somehow this is my fault. For a long time after the accident, I was very far from okay. I was dependent on sleeping pills to get any sleep at all, and my appetite was downwinded. Every time I get in the car, even if I wasn't driving, I feel panic. A few years later, and after a lot of intense therapy, and now I'm mostly okay. I still have occasional nightmares, and I can remember the sounds like it just happened. I haven't fully forgiven myself for it, and I'm not sure if I ever will. But it doesn't stop me from living my day to day life anymore. We had a relative living with us because he was going through chemo and radiation for cancer. He was getting mucus plugs, and we had to try and suction them out so he wouldn't choke. One morning, I heard a knocking sound downstairs, and I thought it was my dad trying to wake me up. I decided to ignore it, but it kept knocking. So I went downstairs to see what was wrong. It was Mr. Eugene, and he was choking on the mucus plug. I yelled out for my parents to come help, but they wouldn't come. I went to check in their room, and they were gone. I tried to clear his throat myself, but I couldn't get it. He was awake and pointed to his throat when I got there, but I just watched him die in front of me. I tried CPR, but it got to the point where the air wouldn't go down. My parents ended up going out of town early that morning, so they weren't home, and I had to call my aunt after 911 to help me with the police and coroner stuff. This happened this past Christmas, and when I hear knocking, I have flashbacks, and I have had more mental breakdowns than I have let anyone know. Had a detainee who neglected to mention a peanut allergy. When he got his challah meal, he only ate the peanuts. Went into anaphylactis, and the MPs called me, the medic. I popped him with the epi and loaded in some IV Benadryl. It goes from dude might die without action to me slicing up his trachea to get air into his lungs. Still a no-go. Apparently, he was also highly allergic to Benadryl, which I pumped straight into his heart. I think about it occasionally, but it doesn't really bother me. He might have just wanted to have a minor reaction to go to the hospital, or he might have been trying to off himself. Either way, dude made bomb vests in the XS variety, so I don't lose sleep over it. Okay, well, that was intense. That was intense. It was almost addicting, like to the point where I couldn't stop reading them. But then it was like, okay, I can't do this no more because even though these are people telling stories, these are people's lives that were lost. In the end of the day, that doesn't take away from the fact that when you are done dealing with it, it hurts you and it affects you and it traumatizes your life. But, anyways, if you made it to the end, thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good rest of y'all day and God bless.